Welcome to the world of the Transgo High Performance Shift Kit. In this video presentation, we'll show you step by step how to beef up your Ford E4OD transmission fast and easy with the Transgo Performance Shift Kit. You'll love it. This transmission is about to come alive. While you are watching this video, stop the tape often and read the instructions. The booklet has the specific instructions. Follow the booklet to the letter through the entire installation. During the installation, finish and review each step before moving on. When installing springs, follow the instructions for customizing options, size, location, and color. When drilling holes, follow instructions for their location, size, and customizing options. Follow shift customizing options when they apply to this installation. These are the typical tools needed to do the installation. First, let's road test the vehicle to see if the transmission is in good working condition. We just want to make sure it has 4 forward gears and reverse. Pull the lever to manual low and move up to second. Now to OD position. There are 2 different types of overdrive off buttons. One is on the dash, looks like this. Some are like ours. It's located here on the end of the shift lever knob. With your foot on the brake, move the shift lever to the OD position. Push the button on the dash or on the end of the gear shift knob and turn the overdrive off. This will keep the transmission from shifting into overdrive. Push the gas pedal to about 1/4 throttle. Feel the 1, 2 and 2, 3 upshifts. Then at 45 to 50 miles an hour, push the overdrive button to feel overdrive, which is 4th. This will tell us if the valve body is working normally. Then try some upshifts at 3/4 throttle to see if the clutches and band are in normal condition. They're holding okay. So let's get started. Release the hood latch. Let's raise the hood and remove the transmission dipstick. Now let's jack the front of the vehicle up like this and place 2 stands here and here. Now we can jack up the rear. When you're done, it should look like this. Please use sturdy jack stands. Before going under the car, let's gather the required tools. You'll need a speed handle and 3 sockets. One 8mm, one 10mm, and this number T27 Torx head. You'll find this Torx head socket at your local parts store. You will also need a drill motor and a small 8mm socket and ratchet, a small and large screwdriver, a drain pan, and some wiping rags. Let's make sure you have the transmission that this kit fits. Notice the pan is large and rectangular and may have, written in the bottom of the pan, metric here and Ford here. Notice the hump here in the middle of the pan, with a cutout corner here on the passenger side. The pan is held on with 20 10mm bolts. Look here on the driver's side, there's an electrical switch bolted to the case. Here's the shift linkage and a main line pressure tap. Now let's look on the passenger side of the transmission behind this plate. There is a large electrical connector with several wires to it. Notice some transmissions have an EPC pressure tap here. This is the correct transmission. Let's get going. Place a drain pan under the transmission, favoring the front. The transmission pan is held on with 20 bolts. With a 10mm socket and a speed wrench, remove all the oil pan bolts except for one toward the rear, here. Now loosen this last bolt very slowly and allow the oil to run over the front edge of the pan and into the drain pan. Lower the pan, empty it, and lay it aside. Now let's remove the filter. If the transmission oil is still hot, protect your hands with a rag. While pulling down slightly, move the filter side to side like this until it loosens enough to be removed. Have the drain pan in position to catch the fluid that will run out of the filter and the valve body. Place the filter in the transmission pan. If the seal remains in the bore, carefully remove it. Look here, toward the rear on the passenger side of the trans. This heat shield needs to be removed. Loosen these two bolts with an 8mm socket and ratchet, and lift the rear up and out of the slot like this. Lay it aside. We'll reinstall it later. Push in on this tab and lift on the terminal to remove this connector. Be careful here. Don't break the tab. This connection is very important and must be kept clean. Let's lay the harness connector and the wire loom up here out of the way. The pan is in place during the valve body removal to catch the fluid that will drain from the trans. Let's get an overview of the things to do next. Toward the front, here, we will remove this accumulator valve body, then this main valve body, and finally this solenoid pack. Let's get going. Find a 10mm socket and loosen these two nuts 2 or 3 turns, here and here. Now change to an 8mm and remove the remaining 11 bolts. Now finish removing the 2 nuts and lower the accumulator body. Turn it over to drain and lay it in the pan. If this filter screen comes down with the accumulator body, it fell from this hole here, don't worry, we will install it when we go back together. Now remove this short bolt here and temporarily install it here at the front. Toward the center, finger tight. This will support the separator plate so the upper check balls will remain in position. Now we're ready to remove this main valve body. It has a manual valve here. Notice here how this shift lever pin is inserted into this slot of the valve. Do not remove these 2 bolts. They hold this lower body to the main body. Find a 10mm socket and loosen these 2 10mm nuts 2 or 3 turns, here and here. Okay, change to an 8mm socket and remove these 14 bolts. Remember, don't remove these 2 short bolts. Now finish removing the 2 10mm nuts. Now lower the valve body, turn it over so it can drain, and lay it in the pan. Now let's remove this solenoid pack. Find a 10mm socket and loosen this nut 2 or 3 turns. Now change to the Torx socket and remove the remaining 9 Torx head bolts. And now we can finish removing this 10mm nut here. To remove this body without damaging anything, put your hand on the top side of the electrical connector here and push down as you pull down with the other hand. Look, here it comes. Nice going. Lay it in the pan. Now let's remove this lower valve body gasket carefully. First, peel the gasket around the short bolt here. Then remove this bolt and install it temporarily in a different hole. And remove any gasket that was under it. The separator plate, we will have this EPC valve and spring left over. They are furnished, because quite often the originals get lost if the transmission is disassembled. Let's take these parts to the bench. Lay these parts out on the bench and clean the pan. Let's go to the package and get the valve body gaskets. There are 4 gaskets. 2 of them are longer. They are the upper gaskets. We will set them aside. Let's take these lower valve body gaskets and put them in the clean pan. Now let's go under the vehicle. Now let's select the lower gasket that matches the separator plate your transmission has. Place one of the gaskets against the plate like this. Then look through the holes in this area to see if the holes in the gasket match the holes in the plate. Uh-oh, this gasket doesn't have a hole here. So let's try the other gasket. There, that's better. All the holes in the plate in this area match the gasket. Now let's oil this side of the gasket like this. And install it against the plate. Let's remove this bolt in front. And install it again in this hole. This bolt will hold the plate and gasket in place. Notch here away from you. We will be removing this 4th accumulator assembly. First, screw in an 8mm bolt and push in slightly to remove this retainer like this. Then remove the plug, the springs, and finally the piston. Clean the bore and blow dry. Now discard the old spring or springs. Let's lay the new springs in order like this. Now install the new springs into each other. Now insert them into the bore of the piston and then into the accumulator body. Let's install this plug, push in to align this groove, Install the retainer. Remove the small bolt. We will remove this third accumulator assembly next. First, screw in the 8mm bolt and push in slightly to remove this retainer like this. Then remove the plug, the springs, and finally the piston. Now let's lay these pieces in order of their removal. Clean the bore and blow dry. Discard the old spring or springs. The instructions show the order of the new springs. Install the new springs into each other like this. Now insert them into the bore of the piston and then into the accumulator body. Now let's install this plug. Push in on the plug until it aligns with this groove. Now install the retainer. Remove the small bolt, and it looks good. Now let's move to this end of the accumulator body and remove this second accumulator assembly. First, screw in an 8mm bolt and push in slightly to remove this retainer like this. Then remove the plug, the springs, and finally the piston. Now let's lay these pieces in order of their removal. Clean the bore and blow dry. Discard the old spring or springs. The instructions show the order of the new springs. Install the new springs into each other like this. Now insert them into the bore of the piston and finally into the accumulator body. Now let's install the plug and push in to align this groove. Then install this retainer. Remove the small bolt, and that's it for this body. Clean and blow dry the assembly, the main valve body, and solenoid pack. Lay them aside. Now we can put the completed bodies into the pan. Lay the new gasket onto the oil pan. Let's go back under the truck and install these parts. Install the main valve body onto these studs, while aligning the pin into this slot of the manual valve right here. Hand tighten these two nuts here and here. Use the speed handle and the 8mm socket and start 14 bolts. Now tighten all these bolts evenly. Finally, tighten the two 10mm nuts. The manual valve is still hooked up. You're doing great. Lube this O-ring. Clean this bore. And install the solenoid pack. And insert the body neck into the case here. Push up into place. And install the 10mm nut. Now start the other 9 Torx head bolts using the speed handle and Torx socket. Tighten all the bolts evenly. Now change to the 10mm socket and finish tightening this nut. Looks good. Remove this bolt and reinstall it back into this plate here. Make sure these 3 bolts are tight. Don't forget this solenoid filter. Insert it into the hole and twist a 1/4 turn. Install the accumulator body over these studs, like this. Install these 2 nuts finger tight, here, and here. Now start these 11 bolts by hand a few turns. Use a speed handle and a 10mm socket and tighten the 2 nuts evenly. Change sockets and tighten the 11 remaining 8mm bolts evenly. Now double check all the bolts. Be sure the manual valve moves easily. Make sure the electrical connector is clean and install it now. Be sure to push down until the tab locks onto the terminal connector. Check the filter in this area for cracks. If it's okay, lube the seal and install the filter. Place the pan gasket on the pan and lift the pan into place while starting 1 bolt at the front and 1 at the rear like this. Start all the bolts in a few turns. Tighten all the pan bolts with a speed handle evenly. Double check each bolt. Pour 8 quarts of fluid into the trans and start the engine with the gear selector in the park position. Now immediately add 2 more quarts and check the dipstick for full. Look, it is still about a pint low. Let's add and recheck. Here we go. It is still a little below full. After it warms up, we'll check it again. While the vehicle is still on the jack stands, hold the brake and run the selector through the gears from park to reverse to neutral to OD, 2, and down to 1. Push the overdrive button to cancel overdrive. Now release the brake and accelerate lightly. As it shifts, watch the speedometer change speeds. Move the shift lever up. Feel the 1-2. Now the 2-3 shift. Now push the overdrive button and feel the 3-4 shift. Step on the brake to stop the wheels. Move the shift lever to the OD position. Now find the overdrive button and turn the overdrive off. This will not let the transmission shift into overdrive. Push the gas pedal very lightly to feel the 1-2 and 2-3 upshifts. Then at 45 to 50 miles an hour, push the button to feel 4th. This will tell us if the valve body is working normally. Caution! Be sure to stop the wheels before shifting the transmission into park. Turn the key off. Okay, let's lower the vehicle. After our road test, we'll recheck the fluid level. Let's close the hood. We're almost ready for a road test. Let's make sure it has 4 forward gears and reverse. Remember, there are 2 different types of overdrive cancel buttons. One is on the dash. Looks like this. Ours is on the end of the shift lever knob right here. With your foot on the brake, move the shift lever to the OD position. Push the button on the dash or on the end of the gear shift knob and cancel overdrive. This will keep the transmission from shifting into overdrive. Push the gas pedal to about 1/4 throttle. Feel the 1-2 and 2-3 upshifts. Then at 45 to 50 miles an hour, push the button to feel overdrive. Now with a little more throttle, let's road test the vehicle to feel the firmer shifts. Again, this will tell us if the valve body is working normally. Everything is okay. Let's try some upshifts at 3/4 throttle and feel the shifts. Let's go have some fun. Yes, this transmission has come alive. We enjoyed developing this kit and hope you have as much fun using it as we had making it. We thank you for using Transgo products and look forward to serving you again with any of the other products that you might want or need.